Hello everyone and welcome to the Lettered Classroom. My name is Bridget Spackman and I am so happy that you are here with me this Sunday night. So we're going to continue our 10-part series in just a moment. For those of you that are new here, I started a 10-part series about 2 weeks ago. Oops. And within that 10-part series, I'm going to be discussing with all of you some different strategies for literacy instruction. We're going to go over different components, and it's all going to tie back to bridging literacy, which is a method that I've started creating and utilizing within my classroom that helps me save time, helps to see the connections between reading and writing, and it's just an overall better way of teaching than by teaching through your standard curriculums. So I'm excited that you guys are here. How's everybody doing? I'm already seeing you guys in the chat. You guys are chatting it up. I have like a nose itch, so sorry. I do not have the corona, I promise. Okay, here we go. So today, I told you guys we're going to be going into vocabulary instruction. I have a lot of really good teaching practices that I'm going to be sharing with all of you. Some pieces are going to be things that you can implement very easily. Others are going to hopefully just be review for you so that you kind of refresh yourself and say, oh yeah, I know I need to be doing that. I tend to feel as though that with vocabulary instruction, it is one of those elements in our literacy where we just kind of forget about it. It just doesn't get as much attention as we feel as though it should be getting. Or we kind of pull it out of the back of our pocket because we know we're supposed to teach those standards and we have to get those grades into the grade book in order to show that we're teaching it. And it's not really doing it justice. So I'm going to hopefully share with you some really good strategies that you can implement today. So I want to say hi to all of you. How's everyone doing? I see some people from Texas. I see people from Florida. I see all my regulars. Guys, thank you so much for joining in. Let's see. Leslie says, I love vocabulary. Girl, I'm so glad you love vocabulary. I think a lot of people don't really love it as much as you do. I'm not very sure. I have to tell you guys, and just kind of me going back to my days when I first started teaching, I remember when I was in my internship and we were doing vocabulary instruction, and it was like the old school way of, I'm going to put on a PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to show you the vocabulary word. Everybody's going to repeat the vocabulary word, and then I'm going to give you the definition. Everybody's going to read it, and then we come up with some different activities to do with it. The activities were great, but it was very isolated. It wasn't in the moment. And while, yes, it was attached to whatever book that it was that we were focusing on from that curriculum piece, it seemed as though it was still so separate that the kids weren't making the connections. So yeah, I'm excited to be able to share this stuff with you. I feel like I should just get going, shouldn't I? I got a thumbs up, so that means I'm just gonna get started. I do have a lot of information that I'm gonna be sharing with you guys today, like 4 pages of notes. So hopefully we'll be able to get through this within the hour, and then I'm still able to answer some questions. Like always, guys, if you do have questions, please make sure to put it into the comment section. Trent's gonna be looking out for those questions. He'll stop me periodically to be able to so that he can ask them, and then hopefully I can get those answered for all of you. So please do not hesitate to go ahead and put them into the box. All right, here we go. So this, of course, is going to tie always back to bridging literacy. This is going to be part 2 of the 10-part series, which is the vocabulary instruction. If you have not seen the first one, I highly encourage you to go back to the first part where we talk all about how to engage our students in reading. How do we engage them? How do we hook those mentor texts into our reading? So that is going to be the first one. And then I also have an introduction that's on my website that you can look at. And that one goes into more of my ELA journey. And so I talk a lot about how I've gotten to this point in my instruction, why I felt it was really important for me to create a new method for teaching literacy, and how I got there pretty much. So here we go, guys. Let's get started with part 2. Did it slide? All right. So here we go. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the purpose of vocabulary instruction. It's always good when we start to talk about anything that we're focusing on in our classrooms of what is the purpose? Why are we doing it? Why are we even bothering with it? Why is it important for my students to be able to know this? Because when you understand the importance of why you are teaching it, then you can relate that back to your students, and then they understand the importance of them having to learn it. So I always communicate this purpose with them so that we can have these conversations. And I'm going to just really quick get onto a little tangent because I had a group of students and they were my 6th graders. And at one point, I had my 6th graders get on to, it's like the books that are online that you can they read to you. I can't remember what it's called, but they were on these books and it was basically reading it to them. And so I told them, I said, guys, I really don't like you being on that website right now. I think there's a time and there's a place for you to be able to read those types of books. However, when you're here in my class, I need it to be aligned to what it is that I'm teaching you so that you can go back and you can practice what it is that you're learning. I said, when you are reading those books, not that they're horrible, but it's just not focused on what we're doing. And you can do that at home. I would just prefer for you to do something different here. And so I had some really good discussions because one of the boys in my class, he says, well, he goes, but what about audiobooks and things like that? I said, well, why do you feel as though it's important for you to be able to use those books in the classroom? Like, why do you think that you should be allowed to read them here? Because I like to hear their opinions and I want their perspectives. And a lot of the times kids are really smart. Like, they have some really good perspectives. And so one of them says, well, it's really cool because when I tap on the word, it'll give me the definition of whatever it is. And so I said, well, that's great. I said, that's really good for you to be able to get the definition like at the snap of, at the tap of a finger onto your iPad. I said, however, let me ask you the question of, does it make you think? Does it make you think as a reader? And they said, well, no. And I said, exactly. And I said, the purpose of what we're doing here in the classroom is to help prepare you for when you leave me and you're going to become an independent thinking reader. I want to be able to provide you with the skills and the strategies that you need to make sure that you're reading effectively when you're by yourself. Not that you're just tapping it, but I want you to think about it. And I want you to really kind of say, what does that mean? I need to pick up on the context clues. What's happening in the story? Like, I need to pick up on all those different pieces to the puzzle in order to determine what is the meaning of this word. And so after we had that conversation, the kids were like, all right, yeah, I get it. Like, it is really important for me to be able to read these different books. So I thought that was a really great way to kind of start this, because they understood the purpose. Once they had a clear understanding of that purpose, they weren't going to argue with me anymore. It wasn't the, but why do we have to do this? It was the, oh, I get it. I understand what she wants me to do, and now I'm going to go out and I'm going to do it. So it was just a really nice way of introducing this. So why do we have vocabulary instruction? What is the purpose of it? We've moved away from this very traditional, I'm going to provide like 3 to 5 vocabulary terms. You need to remember those vocabulary terms. You need to be able to spell them. You need to be able to put them in a sentence. And then you're going to do some like synonyms, antonyms, all that good jazz. And at the end of the week, you're going to take that vocabulary test. And then I'm going to put that test score into my grade book. And that's how I'm going to teach vocabulary instruction. Okay. It was very, very isolated. You had like a set 10 to 15 minute block where you taught those vocabulary words, right? That is the very traditional way of teaching vocabulary instruction. With the instruction that we provide now with our students within this bridging literacy model, the vocabulary instruction is actually embedded into the day that you provide the engagement of the book. So the day that I choose to take out a book, all right, I take out my book, and I'm going to read this book, I already have the vocabulary terms that I want to share with my students. I've already picked those out, and we're going to go into a little bit more on how I do that. So that's how I do it with bridging literacy. So the day that I read the mentor text is the day that they get their vocabulary words. Why? Well, because I'm reading it. In that moment, they're thinking about it. We're talking about the words. And so that's the right moment for me to do it. Not the next day, not 2 days later, but the day that I'm reading it, because we're having those conversations. We're building our information, like of what's happening within that text. So it's important that when I teach that those vocabulary words, I do it right then and there. Okay, so that's going to be my first day. That's how I connect both of them. So we teach vocabulary, not because we want their vocabulary to get larger when they're having conversations. While it is important, and I think that that's something that's going to naturally kind of build with them, the reason we do that is because we want to build resilience. We want them to understand, hey, when you get to a word that you don't know, you don't just move on and just say, blah, 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 and then you keep going. Why? Because that doesn't help their comprehension. So we teach vocabulary to help build the resilience of what do I do when I don't understand a word? And then how do I learn that word in order for me to understand what's happening in the text? That's why we build that vocabulary instruction. And this is such a more effective way than saying, oh, okay, no vocabulary. Let me pull up my phone and let me see the definition of this and this and this. That's going to take you forever. And by the time you end up doing that with all of these different words, they don't remember what's happening inside the text. There's nothing wrong with teaching them how to use a dictionary. There's nothing wrong with teaching them how to use the thesaurus, but that should not be the focus of your vocabulary instruction, all right? So we do this because we want them to have the resilience, but we also do it because words have different meanings. And there are many, many words in the English language where that one word has multiple meanings, okay? So I could say fly, as in I'm going to fly, or there is a fly. They mean different things. And so when we talk about words, we need to have those conversations that they mean different things, and we have to look at the context. What is happening in the story that's going to help me understand which meaning of that word is it that I'm going to end up using. So we have to keep that in mind, that when we are talking about those words, we're looking at what's happening in that book right then and there. And this is why we don't front load. We don't say, hey guys, today we're going to read the story Mr. Lincoln's Way. And in the story, Mr. Lincoln's Way, we're going to have some vocabulary words. Let's learn those vocabulary words now. Okay, so we're going to learn about stunned. Here's the meaning of stunned. We don't do that. Why? Because we're telling them that that word only has one meaning, when it may not have only one meaning. It may have multiple meanings. So we want them to be able to observe how we as readers figure that out when we're inside of the text. Okay, the other reason we do this, the other purpose for vocabulary instruction, is to help students understand the shades of meaning. And so the shades of meaning is actually called semantic gradients. Something really interesting to know when I was doing my research, but that's kind of where it comes from. And what that means is that words weigh heavier than other words, okay? So I could say yell, or I can say howl, or squeal, or cheer. All of those have different weights to them. While yes, they all mean the same thing, they have different weights. So one of them will weigh heavier than another word. And depending on how I want to communicate what's happening in the story, in order for the reader to understand the mood and the tone, I want to make sure that the words that I'm using has the certain weight that goes along with the context that's happening within the text. All right? So that's our purpose. Is everyone good? All's well. I'm taking a break before we move on to our next big topic. Everything's good?
Yep.
All right. So here we learned about the purpose of vocabulary instruction. So now we need to understand the 3 tiers. You guys have probably heard this a ton, but I'm going to go back over it, okay? There are 3 tiers to vocabulary instruction. You have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. How many of you remember this? Just give me like a thumbs up, like a little emoji hand. You already probably have heard this a ton, but I'm just going to review it with you really fast. So those tier 1 words are those less frequent, but they are used in our vocabulary when we talk with individuals every single day. It's words like come, see, happy, table, chair, plant. These are very, very common words that we just use in our everyday language. All right. This is typically those words that students are learning right when they're learning how to read. That's kind of it right there. Your tier 2 words are your high frequency that occur across context. All right. So whatever it is that you're learning about or you're reading about, you're going to find these different words. And these are really important to learn because they enhance the comprehension of the reader. So these are examples like hilarious, endure, despise, arrange, compare. All of those are much bigger words that kids have to have a really clear understanding of what it is that they mean. Then you're going to come into your tier 3 words. Now, these are your domain specific words. So like if I'm learning about something very specific in science or social studies, then these are the words that are going to pop up. So things like an atom, molecule, continent, all of those, an atlas, are all words that are specific to that domain that you're learning about. When we provide our vocabulary instruction with our students when we're doing literature, we want to make sure that we focus on the tier 2 words. All right, tier 2 is where we're trying to aim for. The tier 3 words that are more domain specific, I would really just leave that to your science and social studies content. All right, leave that there for when you're really digging deep into that unit and you're learning about that specific piece. So you're more focused on those tier 2 words. All right, tier 2 words. All right, that's really all I had to say there. I wasn't going to do a ton, but that's just what I wanted to remind you guys. Okay, so when we work with vocabulary instruction, there are a few different things that you want to keep in mind before you start to teach, okay? The first thing that you do, and this is what I do technically, is that I locate my mentor text. I try to think, okay, well, what is the reading skill that I really want to focus on? And once I have, I have an itch on my nose, but once I have that reading skill, I'm going to say, okay, now I need to find the right text that I know it's going to lend itself to that reading skill, which by the way, next week, that's what we're talking about, is how to do reading skill instruction. How do we do that to where it's not taking us forever and ever? But once I have that mentor text and I kind of say, okay, well, Mr. Lincoln's Way is really good for character change. I really like this book for character change. So now I need to figure out, does it have vocabulary word that's going to help enrich my students? So as I kind of go through, and guys, I probably read these books a good 2 or 3 times before I decide on it. I know that's probably really crazy to think. And some of you are like, that's kind of ridiculous. But the more and more I read it, I feel every time I read a book multiple times, I learn something new each time that I do read it. And so as I read it, I might put down a sticky note in different spots. And I might start reading it and say, okay, let me look at this first page. Oh, this actually sounds like a really good word. And so as I kind of find the word, I'm just going to take a little sticky note like this. And I might say, yep, I like that word. I'm just going to put a sticky note there. And this is for me, not for the students yet. We haven't gotten there yet. And so I might keep reading and I might say, oh, look, I found another one. And then I'm going to place it right there on that page as well. And so I would keep doing that. And then I would read it again and see if I found those same words, if those were the words that really stood out to me again. And then once I had the words, I would go through. Hopefully you would have more than 3 words. If you do have more than 3 words, I would really kind of trim it down. So let's say I have 5 or 6, I would try to bring it only to 3, to be honest. I typically don't go above 3 words just because it will take forever for you to give that instruction. It's just too much, okay? you're just wanting to get the idea and just give them that repetitive practice. You don't need to give them repetitive practice with more than 3 words a week. There's just no need for it. So once I have all of my sticky notes, then I'm gonna write them down, those vocabulary words, and I might even line them out and decide which words I specifically want to look for. So in this book, I have 3 words. I have stunned, which is one of them. I have leered, and then I have commotion as the other one. So those are the 3 words that I ended up choosing. And once I choose those words, then I go and look up the information behind the word. I want to know the part of speech. I want to know, are there any other definitions that are out there? I want to look into whether it has prefixes or suffixes that I might want to point out to help them understand the meaning a little bit more. I might want to look at what are some other synonyms that maybe I can compare this to so that my students have a better understanding of it. All of these pieces are going to be things that I do ahead of time. And typically, I don't normally have them this pretty. I'll be totally honest with you guys. Typically, I do it on a sentence strip, and then on the back, I have it all written in pen. So I did this pretty for you guys. You're welcome. But when I have the word, I will write it on a sentence strip. On the back of the sentence strip, I would write whether it's a verb, a noun, an adjective, whatever it is. I would write the definition. I would write the other meanings of that word. And then I would also write the sentence that it is found in the book. Okay, so whatever sentence it has in the book, that's what I'm going to write on the back of that card. That way, when I'm giving the instruction, it just makes it so much easier for me, and I'm not having to fumble and think, okay, well, wait, why do I think it's this meaning, or what are the context clues? That's kind of the pieces there. Question?
Are you choosing words based off a specific skill? And are you choosing 3 words a week or 3 words for the duration of a book?
So it's not on the specific skill. I just use the book that I'm using to teach the skill. I pick the words from that book. That's it. And it is a week. So typically my lessons, I try to tell you guys they last about 5 to 7-ish days. And so it lasts during that duration. So every time I start a new lesson is when it would have new vocabulary. Now you're probably thinking, wait, you do a lesson a day. Yes, I teach every single day. I teach a mini lesson underneath that big lesson. So if you think of the big lesson as the umbrella, and then I have multiple mini lessons underneath that big lesson. So that's kind of how you can think of it. So essentially, I am doing it about every week. So 3 new words every single week. And I give them the definition of one of those words. I do it right there in front of them. And then they will do another one. I'll get to this in a second. Right there in front of me. And then I'll send them off by themselves. So it doesn't take a ton of their time. I don't need it to take a ton of their time. I just want them to have those conversations. I want them to have the practice. I don't want them to spend forever during their reading block working on vocabulary. There's just no point in me doing that. So those are all of the different pieces that I would have on the back of my cards, all right? And that would allow me to provide the instruction a lot more quickly. And I feel as though I am prepared to really have those conversations with my students. Because somebody might actually have a really good vocabulary in your classroom and they might say, well, wait a second, doesn't that have this meaning? And you're like, you don't want to get to that point. You want to just keep the ball rolling and keep the conversation going, because remember, your mini lessons are supposed to last about 15 minutes. 15 minutes, you get in, you get out, you're done. Okay, guys, that's kind of what we're trying to stick to. So in the beginning of this, you have to remember, I want to be able to share my thinking. I want to share the model of how do I determine what that word means inside of the text. And I'm going to backtrack really quick too. So I printed these out. They are super cute. I don't have the space this year because I have everything in Schoology. Everything is pretty much online for me. So I put all my anchor charts in Schoology underneath that lesson. I put vocabulary words in Schoology. It's really nice that it's all just on there and the kids can go in and look at it. So I don't put a ton of stuff up inside of my classroom. I just don't have to. But when I was in kindergarten, I did this a ton. I had a mini book printed out, and then when I would post these in my classroom, I would post the vocabulary words underneath that book. It was a fantastic way for my students to say, oh, okay, I remember what this word means because it came from this book, and they remembered the conversations that happened in the book. So this was just a really easy way for me to do it in kindergarten, and I had them for every single one of my lessons. Another little tip is if you do decide to print them out like this, which you totally can, I would put the book title down in the bottom corner, just so that you can remember what book it goes to, so that when you're taking them down at the end of the year, you can just store them away and then you can reuse them every single year instead of having to print them and relaminate them. It's just a whole process. So it's a very easy and effective way for you to be able to do that. So you are wanting to really make sure that you're sharing your thinking first with the first word. So anytime once I get to that word, I'm going to stop and I'm going to say, hey guys, here's the new word that's here. You know, I see the word. Let me see if I can find what page it was on. Page number is also a really good thing to put in there. Here's one. So he said, then one day he leered at a first grader. What are you looking at, scumball? He said, and he pushed her down and wrenched her backpack away. So as soon as I would read that, I would say, hey guys, I just read that sentence and I had to really stop and I had to think, because there's a word there that I'm really not that sure of. I don't really know exactly the definition of that word. I think I know what it means, but I want to stop and share with you the thinking that I have going on. Okay, so here's kind of the way that I would introduce that to them. As I'm reading that book, I would stop right then and there, and then I would start showing them, okay, well, what's happening in the book? How is the character feeling? Well, right now, I kind of feel like the character may be scared because he's not really being very nice. He's been known as the mean kid, the bully outside on the playground. And so a lot of kids don't really like him. So they're probably feeling a little bit scared right now. What's the mood and the tone? All of these things. What's happening in the book? Where are we in the text? What are the characters feeling? What are the characters doing? What is the mood and the tone? All of those little different pieces is going to help kids be able to build the meaning. All right. And I'm also very fortunate that because my kids have iPads, a lot of the times I will have them just search the definition really fast. They enjoy that part of it. And so they kind of race to define the word and they put their hands up real quick. But you would have that discussion with your students. You would talk about all of those different elements and how it helps to kind of build that understanding of what the words mean. And a lot of the time, kids get really, really close to the meaning of the word. And if they don't get that close, then you have that conversation about, well, what were our misconceptions? What didn't allow us to come up with that meaning? And why do you think? So you would have all of those different conversations with your students right then and there. So you want to be prepared in advance to have that conversation with your kids. Make sure that you're pointing out the mood, the tone, that you already have all of those different pieces identified so that you're prepared to have those conversations. Again, we want to keep it moving. We don't want to spend forever in a day within our mini lessons. 15 minutes, guys, get in and get out. Okay, so once we have that, you're going into the illustrations and you're going into the text. So you're looking at different words that kind of help to support the meaning. You're looking at the illustrations. Well, what's happening in the pictures that you can observe that help you build that? And the entire time, guys, you're using, what are the context clues? What are the context clues? What are the context clues that you're finding in the illustrations? What are the context clues in the text? The kids need to hear that piece. They need to use that piece. They need to use it when they're responding to you, so that way when they come across that question, it's not what is a context clue. They should already have that like in their schema at that point, because you're using it every single time you're introducing new vocabulary words. Do you have a question?
There are several. Are you ready?
Okay, I'm ready. Go, guys.
All right. So, how much time do you devote to teaching vocabulary for a novel lesson? How much time?
So, it will usually take me, when I read a book, when I introduce and I read the book, it'll take me about 20 minutes. And that's from me starting the lesson, doing the vocabulary, and then like finishing the story. 15 to 20 minutes. And that's that first day.
Is there a particular reason for your word choice?
It really depends on what's happening in the book. That kind of helps to build that. The reason that I like to use that word choice is because I want to get them thinking. I want them to see all of the different elements that contribute to the meaning of a word and what kind of builds, how they all relate to one another. To me, it's like a big puzzle piece. So they start to kind of connect all the different pieces to be able to see the entire picture of the meaning of that word.
Joanna asked about adding pictures to vocabulary words.
Yes, I'm going to get to that in a little bit, but I'm not going to get to it yet. So I will get to the pictures to vocabulary words in just a moment.
Would you use one word for multiple lessons? If so, would you pick different words?
So I stick to my 3 words. So if I was doing Mr. Lincoln's Way, these are the 3 words that I would pick right here. The first word that I got to would be leered. And that would be the word that I would model for them. Okay, so I would show them how I would do that. And I would say, hey guys, so here's like all of the different pieces. And this is simply a conversation. I'm not sitting there filling a bunch of stuff out. I'm not doing it. But the next time that I come to the next word in the story, I think the next word is stuns in this book. But when I get to the second word, they're doing it right there in front of me. But they're doing it on a whiteboard. Okay? It doesn't have to be anything fancy. I've done a whiteboard, or I have done it on sentence strips if I want to display it. And typically I do that at the very beginning of the year because I want my kids to constantly see it. And I will try to find a place to put it up in my classroom. Or I'll have them do it on their iPad because we have like a whiteboard app on our iPad. And so the kids will just write on their iPad. So it really just depends on if I'm prepared enough in advance to have the whiteboards out, because I don't typically have them out all the time. Their iPads, they always have with them. So when we get to that second word, then I tell them, hey guys, I want you to turn and talk with your partner. And I want you to think about how is the character feeling? Where are we in our story? And what are the context clues that you're getting from the illustrations and the text? Turn and talk right now. That helps you think of the meaning. And so I would give them about a minute to talk. They would have those conversations going back and forth. They would discuss the meaning. They would discuss the context clues. And then I would say, now what I want you to do is I want you to write. So on your whiteboard, I want you to start with, I infer that blank means blank because blank. And so I would put this up, just like that. I infer that blank means blank because blank. I infer that stunned means blank because blank. Okay? That's what I would put up. So they're sitting in front of me. This takes 2 minutes. Like a minute to 2 minutes. It doesn't take a ton of time. So I've modeled for them just by having the conversation with us as a group. The second time they're doing it on a whiteboard. And the third time I get to the word, so I'm providing them with immediate feedback. Well, I want you to check this. Remember, let's think about what's happening in this part of the text. Ooh, that's a great way for you to show that example. Really easy, quick, we're done. When I get to the third word in my book, because I'm still reading the book, like I'm still going through, we're just pausing and we're thinking like good readers do. We just don't move over it. We stop and we think. So when I get to the third word, I'm going to tell them, hey, so whatever group, I often call my kids Mac team because it's just out of habit. So I say Mac team. I said, today when you go out, I really want you to think about what's happening in this book. So I'm going to have you pause and we're going to think for just a second, just in our brains. We're not going to think out loud. We're just going to think in our brains. So sometimes I make them do a bubble. My 6th graders will not do bubbles. They're like, no, not doing that, Miss Fackman. But my 4th graders will still do a bubble because when they have their bubbles, they pop it to show that they're done. They thought they've made their thinking happen and they're ready to move on. So 6th graders don't like the popping of the bubble. But I will say, hey, Mac team, today, when you go out, you're going to complete the final vocabulary word. So we've learned 2 really good words today. We've learned leered and we've learned stunned. And there were some really good conversations about what we think these words mean. So today when you go out, you're going to have the word commotion. And I'm going to place this paper up. So maybe I have the paper here. I'm going to place this up in my classroom. It's up on the board. Let's pretend it's up on my board at the moment. And I say, it's highlighted with a sentence so that you can see it. So I want you to take a picture of it because again, we're all iPads. It's crazy. But if you don't have iPads, you could just give it to them in a paper format. Okay. So I would say, I want you to take a picture of this and I want you to using the vocabulary graphic organizer, which again, they're used to because I've taught them this multiple times. All right. The first couple of times I ease them in. All right, I model this, I go over it, but once I do this multiple times, I shouldn't have to go over it a million times. I'm not doing it every single time. So I would say using this, I want you to submit it and I want you to put it into your, we have a book, like a book creator. I don't know how many of you have ever seen Book Creator. It's fantastic. My kids love them some Book Creator, but they will take their Book Creator and they will put all of their words inside of it. And then they will have those graphic organizers so they have like a collection of words by the end of the year. And so we like talk about those words, we discuss them, we look for them in different books and we have those conversations. And so when we have our morning meeting, but it's at the beginning of every ELA class that I have, we would just basically share some of the words. Hey, I had a new word that I found in my book that we learned from blank and blank, and here's the word. Fantastic. Move on. It doesn't take a ton of time. So I would tell them today, after we finish this book, I'm going to have you go over there and I want you to complete the graphic organizer for your last vocabulary word. And then I want you to have that submitted to me. You can turn it into box. I have them submitted through Schoology and then they're done. That's literally all we do. Okay, that is all we do. I'm going to get to the next part, like at the very end, what I have them kind of finish it off with. But that's it. They just collect words. And so they have this book creator, which it allows them to draw. It allows them to find pictures. They find synonyms and different things. And the kids really enjoy it because it's their way of being able to build that vocabulary piece. They submit it to me, so I do check it. I want to make sure that they're doing it right. I want to make sure that the words that they are collecting, the definitions and the context clues that they're using is correct. So we have those conversations, but I do that during conferencing. I don't do it during my group time. So I've modeled our first word. They've done it right in front of me with the second word. And that third word, I send them off. And I say, you're going to go and find this piece, okay? So I feel as though I went through all of that information and this is what instruction looks like. So I never moved the bar over. But that is it. So I'm reading the text. I show them and I model for them. I pause and I think. And then we ask questions about what's happening in the stories. I have them write it in front of me, what they think the meaning of the word is. And then I have them go off and complete it with their third word. So they have 3 vocabulary words that they've learned that week. And they're done. Here is the last piece that I do with them on using their vocabulary words. So when they're working on their writing, because remember, bridging literacy is connecting the reading and writing that we're doing in class. I do require them to pick out 1 word from each of the mentor texts within that unit. So there's typically 4 lessons within that unit. And I say you need to pick 1 word out from each. So they need to have a total of 4 vocabulary words. Sometimes my kids will come up to me and say, hey, Miss Backman, I really like both of these words from this book. Can I please use them both and not one from the other one? And I will make exceptions, but I want them to try. And some of them do a really good job with it. Some of them will use all of the words, which is pretty impressive. But they have to have at least 4. And so when I'm checking their work, they have to tell me what are the 4 words that they use. And how I do this, How I do this is I build it into creating they have to do a reflection at the end of their writing piece. So when they're reflecting about the writing that they've created, they then have to, can you get to it?
Yeah.
They then have to tell me what are the 4 words that I use. And that's in their reflection that they do for their end of the writing piece. So it's a very easy way for me to say, okay, here are the 4 words that they had to work on. And so boom, then I'm able to very quickly like check through their writing. So I make them use 4 of those vocabulary words. It's a very easy, very effective way for getting them to try to build that vocabulary and really understand the meanings of words and seeing if they're able to apply that into their own writing piece. Does that make sense? Yeah? Super easy, guys. It doesn't have to be anything big. I think sometimes we always feel like the kids have to do everything, but why can't they just do it with 1 word? Why do they have to do it with 3 or 5 words? Because if you're doing it every single week, that's still a lot of words that they're building into their vocabulary. And what you're wanting to really look at is the conversation. Guys, I am so unbelievably big. I think it is so important that we focus on the conversations that are happening between books and between our writing with one another versus us just like saying, okay, now you're going to go off and work on the vocabulary words and submit it to me. It's not always about just making sure you get that grade. And if you have to get that grade, you did 2 of them, have them go ahead and go out and do all 3 words and submit all 3 words. They should at least get 2 of them right because you had the conversations right there in small group, but then you're just seeing if they can do it by themselves. Have them do that if you feel as though you need to have that grade. But for me, it's so much more important just having that conversation. And if they get the 1, I'm checking it off because they did a fantastic job. Moving on. They're going to have another chance next week to be able to practice that piece of it. So I hope that makes sense. I love it.
My left arm's famous. There's quite a few questions. When do you want to do that?
We can get questions because I'm moving on to activities last. It's my last section.
All right. Love the process of the 3 words within the mini lesson. Oh, that's not a question. If you had an ELL student who didn't understand the definition of the word, would you consider ever allowing the students to look up the definition or synonym using their electronics during instruction?
Yes. So the question is, for those of you who may not be able to hear him, if you have an EL who's struggling with the definition of the word, would I have them look it up? Absolutely. Have them look it up. There is no harm in having them not do that. But I promise you, if you're choosing the words that are perfect for your students and they fit where they are for their needs, if you're choosing those right words for them, and on top of that, you're having those discussions about what's happening in the story, they're going to pick up on it. I promise you they will pick up on it. The illustrations, what's happening, how are they feeling, what's the mood and tone, they will understand the definition. They may not be able to effectively be able to communicate it because they don't have the words to communicate it, but they know the meaning. Because they see all of the different pieces. They can pick up on that. They just don't know how to put it in words to you. So they know what it means in their head. They can put it into their own language. They can't communicate that to you. But yes, absolutely. Have them look up the definition. Have them look up synonyms and antonyms. Have them do all of those different pieces. But the biggest piece, the biggest part that you want to drive home at the end of the day, it's right there when you're reading that book and having that conversation with your students, right?
Next.
Yep.
Do you prepare the vocabulary organizer for each of the words?
If I'm having them all do all 3 words, yes. They would have to do it for each of the words, yes. And it doesn't take them long. They get pretty, well, unless they try to get really creative, because in Book Reader, they have like all of the different brushes and the different colors. And so the kids get really into making their illustrations. They're all about that.
And Stacy, time to teach. I'm confused on the 4 words lessons you just mentioned. Please clarify.
4 words lesson.
I'm not sure if that was the 3.
Okay, so I'm going to go back over it. I have another book that I did pick out, which, by the way, this book, I bought it used at Bucks A Million. This book is Spuds. It's a really, really cute book if you have not read it at all. Sometimes when I go to the bookstore, I tend to get carried away with the used books. I think it was like $2. How do you say no to that? And it's hardback. Yes, please. So here's what I do. So I'm going to go over the entire example all over again. So let's say I am wanting to do this book, Spuds, and I'm going to do it on plot. It's a really good book for plot, by the way. It has a very nice sequence of events with a very defined climax and inciting incident. It's a good book for plot. So let's say that that's what I'm going to use it for. I'm going to end up teaching plot. I'm not going to teach it that day, obviously. I just need to engage my readers in the text. And I'm going to talk about vocabulary. We're just going to read the book. That's all I'm going to do that day, okay? So remember, if you have not seen part 1, go back and see part 1 after this, and then you'll kind of see the connections. So I'm going to read the book with them, and then as I stop, I'm going to have my vocabulary words that I'm going to have out. I didn't do it with this book because I literally just bought it not that long ago, but I did go in and put them using sticky notes. So as I would go and I would be reading this book with my students, we're reading a book. I will actually read this little bit to you guys because it's actually really sweet. My big sister, Maybelle, she's always planning and scheming. She'd been watching Mr. Kennedy's harvester for days. Jack, she said, I'm thinking we need a tater harvest of our own. And tonight looks just about right for it. Ma's been working so hard, Maybelle said. Let's bring her in something extra. Unless we gather them spuds off Kennedy's fields, they'll all go to rot, sure thing. And that's just plain wasteful. Ain't that right, Eddie? Little old Eddie, he just dotes on Maybelle. I don't know why. That boy hooked his big eyes on Maybelle's face and said, Okay, so as soon as I read that spot, I would say to my students, hey guys, as I was reading this, there were a lot of different pieces that I was picking up. Well, the first thing that I started picking up here are the illustrations. There are a few things that I'm starting to notice. One, I'm noticing the patches on the clothing that's happening within my characters. And what does that end up telling us? I want you to whisper to your students right now or whisper to your partner right now and tell them, what do you think that means? The patches on the clothing, what do you think that means? And so then they would whisper to one another, and then I would say, yeah, you guys are right. I feel as though they don't have the money in order to get new clothes. So they have very old clothes that have all the patches in them to cover up the holes. The other thing that I started picking up on these 2 pages was that Maybelle, the older sister, was starting to come up with a plan to go to a neighbor's yard and steal taters. Does anybody know what a tater is? It reminds me of something tater tots. What do you think a tater might be? And so we would have a conversation real quick. Potatoes, fantastic. So then here I'm going to say, and the last thing I noticed was this word dotes. The word dotes. And let me read that sentence to you all over again. He just dotes on Maybelle. I don't know why. That boy hooked his big eyes on Maybelle's face and said, He dotes. What do you think the meaning of that word dotes means? Okay, I'm going to think for a second, because in my head, as I'm starting to think about it, I know that Eddie is little. He's little old Eddie, so he's probably the younger sibling. And I noticed that it said big eyes. So the author comments about big eyes. And here it was saying that he doesn't understand why he dotes on Maybelle. And he has big eyes. Well, I know from my own schema that when somebody has big eyes, it's because they have this very fond affection for somebody. So I think based off of the pictures by the big eyes, I don't know why, I think that the word dote means to be fond of. That's what I'm thinking it is. And to be fond of is a verb, right? It's an action that we perform. So as soon as I did that, I would move on. All right, that's my example to them. So I would keep reading. That's it. That was me modeling it for the students, okay? And so as I kept reading, then I would get to this next part, right? We're going to the next page. We three kids headed out Wattled Road in the Rattlebank fashion. Maybelle, she goosed us with the meals Maud made out of them spuds. You'll see, Ma's gonna boil 'em and bake 'em. She's gonna slice 'em thin as fingernails and fry 'em up crusty brown with lots of salt sparkling. Okay, as soon as I would read that, I would say, guys, I need to stop and I want us to think for a second. I want us to think about the word goosed, okay? Because when I think of a goose, I think of an animal, but I don't think it's meant that way. So I'm going to reread that sentence for you, and then I want you to stop and think. I want you to think about what's happening in the story. What are you noticing in the illustrations? What do you notice about the language and what's like the context of what's occurring in the text? And then I want you to think about what you infer goose means. And so as soon as I would reread that, then I would have them turn and talk with a partner. And then as soon as they are done turning talking, I would say, all right, guys, on your boards, I want you to write, I infer that goosed means blank because blank. Right now, everybody start writing. And so everybody would take out their boards. They would start writing. In my case, iPads. They would all start writing them. And as soon as we were done with that, I would say, you know what, I'm going to have such and such person share. I really love what you wrote down. Can you share what goosed means? And as soon as I do that, I teach my kids this. They say, me too. And so as soon as I get a bunch of me too's, and then I get somebody who does, they give me like a no, I don't think so. I would say, well, what do you think it means? Here's that meaning. Well, let's talk about it. And then we would move on. 2-3 minutes tops, and I'm moving on with the text. That's it. That's all it is. Once I get to the next word, so I would get to my final word here. As I got to this final one, I would say, I pulled the wagon with Eddie curled inside, blissful in the moonlight. Bringing up the rear, Maybelle trudged like an old mule, dragging them tater sacks behind her. Okay, as soon as I get to there, I would say, boys and girls, MAC team in my case, I would say, guys, today when you go out after we're finished reading this book, I really want you to think, I'm going to allow you to pause and think for a second about what that word trudged means, okay? I'm going to reread that sentence for you just so that you can think about what that meaning is, because you're going to complete a vocabulary organizer and submit that to me on that word, all right? So here's that word again. Let me read it for you. I pulled the wagon with Eddie curled inside, blissful in the moonlight. Bringing out the rear, Maybelle trudged like an old mule, dragging them tater sacks behind her. All right, now stop and think. And then, like, my fourth graders like bubbles, but the other ones don't. They just kind of give me a thumbs up once they're ready. And so as soon as they see them that they're all ready, I would move on. And I would say, okay, blah, blah, blah. I would read the end of the book and I would say, all right, guys, when you go out today, don't forget you have to complete the graphic organizer for the word trudged. Now, if you need to reread the sentence, I did copy the page. It's up on the board. You can go and take a picture of it with your iPad and take it back to your seats. But that is what I want you to have that done. Complete it, turn it into my box, and we'll talk about it before we get started with our group tomorrow. And we're done. That's literally it. I don't make it fancy at all. Questions on that?
One said, I think that if I'm reading this right,
Okay.
she's Spanish bilingual. Is it okay to instantly transfer all of your information to her purpose by switching languages? I believe your explanation is multi-purposeful.
Yes, absolutely. Yep, it's just good reading skills. That's all it is. Okay?
Do you encourage students to bring their dictionary because they do not have iPads?
I would encourage them to use a dictionary. I wouldn't say to bring them to group. No. I would not bring them to group. I would just, once you send them off to work on the word that they have to complete by themselves, they can look it up. But they're in group, you're having conversations about what it means there in the text. Nowhere else. You have your definitions all ready to go. On every single one of my sticky notes, I had the definition ready to go so that I could clarify that information for them if they needed it, but I would not have them sit there and look it up. That's going to take way too much time. Have them do that independently if they want to use it as a resource. I don't teach them to use it like every single day, but only have it there as a resource, because that's how we do it. We figure out the meaning based off of the context clues as we read. We don't look up every single word. There's no time to do that. So we're trying to provide them with really good skills to be able to use it and implement them right away. Okay? All right. So we're going into the very last topic for this live chat. And we're going to talk about some activities, because I like activities. Every once in a while, my students really, really enjoy activities. So let's talk about some different activities that we can use inside of our classroom to help kind of build that. And again, these are meant to be either independent or very, very quick. The only one that I have I've used a few of these. Actually, I think I've used all of them in my group, but I do it as a quick, all right, let's get the group going. Let's get our brains flowing. Let's do this as a quick practice. And then boom, we're going to jump into our lesson. So I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 ways for you to be able to use vocabulary words as a practice. So the first one is the semantic gradients, which I was talking about, which you can consider that as like your shades of meaning. So the reason we do this, guys, is to be able to gain a broader and deeper understanding of the words that we're going to be teaching. So here's what this means. You have a group of words that mean the same. In this case, I have 2 different examples that I'm going to show you. So let's say I have a word that's break. All right. So I have the word break. I have the word explode, which, by the way, again, guys, when I say I'm not fancy, I am not fancy. I literally took colored paper with my paper cutter, and then I just cut them and I wrote the words. That's all I did. So I have the word break, explode, rupture, shatter. Such good words. Splinter, fracture, and tear. Okay? All of these words have pretty much the same type of meaning, but it's a different shade. So the activity that you could have your students do is organize them from least to greatest. Which one has the least impact and which one has the greater impact? And so you have that discussion as they're trying to organize it. This is fantastic and very easy to do for your groups. So I would create multiples of these sets, and then I would just have my kids in either groups of 2 or 3 right there in my small group partners, and they would work on it immediately, and then we would move on. That is it. That is all I do with it. All it's meant to do is having the conversation. Again, I feel like I can't say this enough. Conversation is so important when it comes to literacy instruction. We're having the conversations about why they believe that one of these words has a greater impact than the other. So that's the first one. The second way that you can do this is then by taking a word and then finding the opposite. So let's say the word that I found in my vocabulary in my book is mutter. Okay? I would then go and find synonyms that have the same meaning. So whisper, murmur, hum, mumble, and there's mutter, okay? Then I would look up the opposites. I would look up the antonyms. And then I would go to yell, hoot, howl, squeal, cheer, and shrill. I would mix all of these words up, okay? I would mix all of them up. And then I would have them place it on a continuum. So they would have to find the opposites, and then they're also then having, this one's way harder than the other one, by the way. I would have them find the opposites, and then I would have them find all of the pieces in between. So they're going from one extreme to the next. Great activity to do with partners. groups of 3s, have them do this independently, but it's fantastic for conversations. So this is what shades of meaning basically are. You can come up with these. All you need is a thesaurus to be able to do this. Super simple activity to do. Okay? So that's the first activity for you. The next one that I have is quiz trade, which somebody had mentioned earlier about the pictures and using pictures. I love using pictures for that. I went on to Quizlet. Quizlet's my favorite to be able to do these with. And then I looked up to see if first somebody else had this, because I didn't want to make it. Mr. Lincoln's Way. And there was another teacher out there that had already found all the vocabulary words for Mr. Lincoln's Way. Thank you to that teacher, because then all I had to do was print it. So I have the word, and it has a picture behind it with the definition. Same thing. Every single one of them has a picture behind it. So with Quiz Trade, and I've done an activity, I've probably placed this in one of my videos. You pass out the words, and then the kids have an opportunity to find someone, and I usually have music on. So they will find someone, they will quiz each other on their words, and then they will trade the word, and then they will go somewhere else and they would find another person, quiz each other, and then trade the words. That's why it's called Quiz Trade. Great activity to be able to do. The other activity that I have done is, and I love this one, is I've built a story using the words. So I will pass out the words to my students in my group, and then I would start it. So I would start a story like randomly. I would say, and you're not planning this out, like this is not planned at all. I would say, Jimmy slumped into his chair after he came into the house and his mom told him to get started cleaning right away. Boom. I used my word, okay? Then somebody else would then have to use their next word, coaxed. So then they would have to continue the story. Jimmy then Jimmy coaxed his mother, to try to do this. It's hard. You have to allow them to kind of think with it, but it's really, really fun. And my 6th graders, they have a blast with this type of activity. My 4th graders need a little bit more time with it. I try to do more of the other activities than I do this. 6th grade, they love, love, love it. So they build a story off of it. The next one that I have is that's 3, right? I did 3. The last one that I have is to be able to have them answer questions with you using the vocabulary word. So they would have to say, let's say I had the question of commotion. So I would pull out this card and I would create a question. I would say, what do you think all the commotion is coming from? From across the hall. And so they would have to then answer that question. So you're getting them to think about the meaning of the word and then be able to reply with an answer with it. So they're not necessarily using the word. They're just listening to how you're placing it into a question so that they can answer it effectively. So very simple. They're not crazy fancy activities, but they're things that you can do to help build that vocabulary knowledge within your classroom. Okay?
Use the vocabulary as a warm-up, or is it?
Sometimes. I don't do it every time. I'm going to be honest. There are some weeks where I don't do any sort of activities with the vocabulary words. There are other weeks where I will. It truly depends on how much I have to do with them and how hard the skill is. So if I'm doing character change with 6th grade, because I've done this book with 6th grade with character change, I really want to make sure that I focus on the skill. The vocabulary might not be as important to me because I know for a fact that character change is going to be very difficult. And I'm not talking about the character at the beginning was this, the character at the end was this. No. 6th grade, it's more so looking at the events. What are the events that are occurring within the text that's causing the character to react? And how do they react to those events? And how does that lead them to the next, to where they end at the ending of the book? That's hard. It gets them to think way more deeply. So I wouldn't do all these activities with this book. There's just no way. My focus would be on the skill that week. Now, there are other weeks where maybe we're talking about setting, we may be talking about theme or something to that extent, and I would be happy to do those activities because they're not as intense when I'm going into those mini lessons. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so as always, guys, I'm going to tell you that I have a community called the Bridging Literacy Community where I offer a lot of information when it comes to this. I am very excited because for my Bridging Literacy members that are in my chat right now, guys, I have our very first #1 roadmap, huge production of a post that's coming to you. So if you remember, I talked about the Bridging Literacy Roadmap. These are all of the 9 different elements that you would want to consider when building bridging literacy into your classroom. So I'm going to have the first one. It's going to be coming out this Wednesday. So I'm going to have it launch on Wednesday. You're going to find it within the community. But if you are interested in this model, if you want to learn more, if you want to learn from like-minded teachers, I highly encourage you to check out the community. I did drop a link right there into the live chat, so you can click on that link and it'll take you directly there. But I honestly believe that this is something that gets kids thinking, it encourages the conversations, and it goes so much more deeply than just having your reading done. It connects to what they're doing in writing, and you're really going to start to see your students flourish at the end of it. So highly recommend that. But yeah, so that is going to be it. What questions do you have? Whew. I feel like my voice is going. This is what happens when I don't teach for a week and then I talk for a really long time. My voice goes away. C'est la vie. Is that right? Did I do that right?
Does this work for non-common core? I'm in Texas and we have
Yes.
TEKS.
Yes. Absolutely.
Would this work with Learn Zillion?
Learn Zillion. So from what I know about Learn Zillion, it's like a video model, and then they kind of provide you with different discussions and questions, and to that extent, I don't necessarily know it very well when it comes to the curriculum piece of it. I've only used it in math. I have honestly never used it in literacy. So to be honest, I'm gonna have to say I don't really know. I don't know the answer to that question. I would have to research that in order to be able to provide you with a decent response.
Aaron wants to know about your remote learning.
For?
Your school, I'm assuming.
Oh, we're talking about because I'm not in school right now?
Yeah.
So, okay, I will open this up. So right now, I am not providing instruction to my students because it is a state mandate. I am not to give any sort of instruction. So that was last week and this week. It is very crazy. It is very hard to cope with. I had some really rough days at the end of last week because I start to go crazy in this house. But as of right now, I am not providing instruction. If or when we do have to provide instruction online, I have to say I'm in a pretty darn good sweet spot. We're really good. Because my district is so forward thinking with technology, every kid has a device in our district. We have the abilities that we've already been doing this, okay? Everything that I teach in my classroom is online. All of the assignments is online. They have videos online. They answer questions and discussions, and they, explore things. All of it is online, that it's nothing new for them. So if I was to have to go to only teaching with distance learning, my kids are going to be fine. I know that I will have a handful that I will have to email over and over, but that's really it. So yeah, I'm not too stressed about it, just because again, I'm in such a fortunate spot, and I know that there are so many teachers out there that do not have the opportunities, and they don't have what I have in my district. But I am very fortunate in that I do. So my students will be fine. I know that they will be. I'm just ready to be able to talk to them and see them. So what's really cool is, like, with Schoology, they have almost like a Skype is what you can call it, but it's within our learner management system, which is our LMS is what they call it. And so I would have those conversations with my kids. So it's all in there. And I still follow the bridging literacy method all through remote learning. Again, because I use it already and the kids are used to it, they have their folders and they work through their folders and they know where to find their assignments. So it makes it very, very easy for me. So I will continue using bridging literacy with my students if I do distant learning.
Does this work for second grade anthology? If using an anthology and the story has more than 3 words, what do we do?
Only choose 3. Kick the other ones out. That's all I'm saying. You don't need to do it. I know you're going to be like, oh, but there's so many good words. I just want to use them all. I get it. I've had those situations where I'm like, but I really like all of these words. I promise you, they will really come up somewhere else in another book that you're going to end up reading. So don't stress about it. Just send them off. Let them just kind of go into the universe. The kids will pick up on it at another point. So I wouldn't stress. Only 3 words. Don't make it bigger than what it is. It just doesn't need to be.
Lola asked, how do you follow bridging literacy with the remote learning? Like, how do you go about it?
Hey, you see that pile that's back there?
I see it, yes.
Can you bring me that pile
The
that's
whole
right there?
pile?
No. I think that one. Are those little colorful cards in there? Guys, I wasn't prepared for that. All right, here we go. So for those of you curious about bridging literacy with my remote learning, so I'm really excited. I think I'm going to cross my fingers. Everybody, let's all cross our fingers really fast. Because I think I'm going to finally have a product that everybody is going to have free access to, coming within maybe the next week. I'm trying to cross my toes. But within that freebie that I'm going to provide for all of you, it breaks it down. Oh, this is good. Get ready. Ooh, this is so exciting. It breaks it down. I have each of the writing units written out for you. All right. And within each of those writing units, you also have the 4 reading standards that you're going to teach within that writing unit. All right. So it makes it easier. Instead of me saying to you, hey, here's the entire Common Core, you're going to teach it and you're going to do all literature during this one time. Good luck. Okay. Instead of doing that, what if I told you, hey, during the month of October, you're going to teach a personal narrative and you're only going to focus on these 4 reading skills. Okay. That's it. That's all you got to do. Feeling good about that, right? It is so much more, it's so much easier to manage when you break it down that way. So I follow those units within my classroom. I've been trying them out. They've been working. I'm loving every single moment of it. And so when my kids left me, I was like running around like a chicken with my head cut off because I wanted to ensure that they knew where they were. Some of my kids in reading, they don't remember where they are when they come the next day. And it's like I have to remind them what folder they're working in. So in order to do that, I created these little punch cards. So this one is my informational unit. It's for my pride group. So these are my 3rd graders. All right. They're really 4th graders, but they're working on 3rd grade standards. So that's one of them. Then I had an informational unit for my 4th graders. This is their punch card. And then I had another one for research unit, 4th grade punch card. And then I had a 6th grade informational unit punch card. So basically, I have informational unit. That's the writing that they're going to do, that type of writing that they're doing. And then here are all the lessons. It's a lot of lessons. It's really not that bad when you think about it. But if I told you you're doing 4 reading skills, I have lesson 1 lesson 2, lesson 3, and lesson 4. 4 reading skills. Remember, lesson is really big. And then underneath that, I have a lot of mini lessons. So under lesson 1, I have mini lesson 1. So it's 1.1. Then I have lesson 1, mini lesson 2. So it's lesson 1.2. Lesson 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, and then it goes to the next one. 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, 2.5. It takes them through it all, and then at the very end, they have their final writing piece that they have to submit to me. Okay? So, when they left me, I had punched all of the lessons that they had already completed. So then that way they knew, okay, so when I start, I'm going to start on lesson 3.1. So I need to go to that folder. And within that folder, the only things that I would really need to add videos for would be the books. If I had to do this, I would have to read the books to them, which I've already started planning. I would have to do the grammar lesson, do the reading skill lesson, and all of those pieces would need to be added into those folders. But they have all of their discussions, their graphic organizers, the assignments, everything they need to do is within that folder, which is again why I'm very grateful that my kids are used to it. They know just to kind of go through it. So they would just complete the assignments and then they can give themselves a check mark. I told them, I said, don't you dare hole punch that. I was like, even if you have a hole puncher, don't you dare do it. They're just checking themselves off. And then as they continue to check off and finish a folder, that's when they give themselves a check when they finish that folder. When we go back to school, I would be able to punch their card to show that they did complete it. So that is essentially what it is. Like that's basically what I've done. But that's how they know what they're working on, and that's how I kind of work through the bridging literacy method using it. To answer your question, did I go on a tangent?
Yep. And somebody asked about the MAC team teaching 4th, 5th, and 6th, and how do you break up? What do you teach? If you teach one specific topic or the subject?
I teach it all.
So how's it split up?
So in math, we're a little bit different. In math, we decided to do it by grade level. So I teach 5th grade math. The reason why we did this is we tried to do it to where we had like everybody had multiple grade levels, because we didn't want to be known as the grade level, like the 6th grade teacher or the 4th grade teacher. We didn't want to be known as that. So we started off when we first started the MAC team where we all had different grade levels for each of the different subjects. We found that with CPM, which is college preparatory math, which is what my 6th graders work on, it was just too hard. They needed to be 6th grade needed to be in a classroom by itself if they were working on CPM. So we decided to just have a 4th grade math, 5th and 6th grade math. And it's nice because we stagger the independence to help get them ready for 6th grade math, because it is very, very independent. It is a lot of collaboration that's happening there. It's really cool, but it's just a lot. So I teach 5th grade math, and then the way that we structured it for our reading is that we all kind of have a little bit of everything. So I teach a 6th grade group, a 4th grade group, and then I teach a 3rd grade group, essentially. But that's kind of how it's done.
Are you going to put the punch cards in bridging literacy?
Yeah. Got your back, guys. Punch cards are coming to you. I just got to finish making them because I only have them for so many minutes. I was literally like, oh my gosh, how are these kids going to know where they're supposed to be? And so I made them that Friday. Like, it was like a half day, and I was scrambling to make them for the kids. But yeah, I will absolutely put these in. It's a really nice, easy way for them to know all of the different things that they have to do.
That's it. We gotta go.
Ooh, it's 8:18. Okay, so don't forget, guys, if you are curious about bridging literacy, I encourage you to head over to theletteredclassroom.com. You can learn more there. Next week, we're going to be talking about reading skills and how to effectively teach a reading skill within that 15-minute increment time block. And provide practice for your students that is going to be useful and beneficial for them. So thank you all so much for watching. Please make sure to give this video a thumbs up. We're actually going to consider taking the video down, but reposting it tomorrow. So you might receive a message in your email inbox saying that the video has, that I've posted a new video. It's just us reposting this video because we've noticed a little bit of lagging that's been happening with my voice and my lips. It's just kind of annoying. So we are going to have this back up in the channel. I also please encourage you so much that if you can just give me maybe a minute or two of your time, put a comment whenever I repost it into the actual YouTube, not the live chat comment, but a true comment, because it really helps YouTube say, oh, people are engaged. They like her video. Maybe we should share it out. And it allows me to get out so much more to other teachers out there about bridging literacy and really encourage them to build their literacy instruction in their classroom. So if you don't mind, just say, hey, she's awesome, or I posted a comment, or we loved it, or something. It would be so fantastic of you. So just keep that in mind. You might see that come up in the next day or so, but thank you all so much. Please stay safe. Wash your hands. I wish you all the very, very best, and I will be back next Sunday for another live chat. Bye, guys.